Hello, folks, and welcome. This is Dan from Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today I'm going to be doing a overview of the game Eminent Domain. Eminent Domain is a deck building and tableau building 4X style game. In the game Eminent Domain, the players are each a interstellar empire. We will be colonizing and conquering planets and adding them to our empire and researching technologies and producing goods and shipping them and other cool stuff like that. For the purposes of my overview today, I will be covering only the base game. The only thing that I've borrowed from the escalation expansion is this central player board that we see in front of us right now. This just gives you a different loadout of where all the cards go. It also gives you this handy dandy chart over here, which tells you how many cards to remove or add if playing at various player counts. So at the start of the game, these technology stacks are here. They are not randomized. There's a randomized set of planets to be potentially explored. Once you've removed the appropriate number of cards due to player count, according to this chart, you have to give each player their starting deck. So their starting deck contains two survey cards, one warfare card, two colonize cards, two produce trade cards, two research cards, and one politics cards for a deck of 10. They also get one random start planet face down. Everyone can take a player reminder tile. Shuffle these before you distribute them, because one of them will determine who is the start player. As you can see on this player reminder, on your turn you get an action, which is optional, a roll, which is mandatory, and then you do a cleanup step. Whenever any player does a roll, each other player in turn order may choose to follow that roll, also by playing cards, and we'll get into how that works. Or they may dissent. If they dissent, they simply draw a single card from their deck. I am going to describe each card in order here. I'm going to describe its action and then its roll. And that should cover most of the game. If you play Survey as your action, you will simply draw two cards from your draw pile. Because this is a deck building game, at any point in time, if you have to draw from your draw pile and there are no cards left remaining, or there are not enough, you simply draw what you can, reshuffle your discard pile to make it a new draw pile, and draw the remainder. All rolls will work the same way. When you select a roll, you'll first take a card from the center roll and put it in front of you. So if I were to pick the survey roll, I'd put that there. Then you can boost the roll with cards in your hand. So I can play this survey that's in my hand. And then you perform the roll based on how many symbols or cards you have access to. Colonized planets can also boost rolls, and we will see that when we get into how to acquire planets. But as you can see, if I am leading the survey roll, then I get to look at X cards, where X is the number of survey symbols I have played, and I get to keep one of them. If you are following somebody else's survey roll, you get to look at the number of survey symbols -1 planets and keep one of them. So if I did this right now, I'd be looking at these two planets, 6-3, 5-4, advanced, metallic. Cool. The planet cards here, when you're looking at them, you can look at either sides. The back there will tell you what kind of planet it is and how difficult it is to colonize and or conquer it, with the numbers there at the top. This side of the card represents what it does for you once it has been colonized or conquered and is in your empire. You have victory points there with the star in the top right. Not all planets have them, but both of these planets have roll symbols in the top left. As I said, those will boost or improve the strength of those particular actions. This planet has a spot for a resource. We will get into that more when we get into produce trade. I'm going to add this to the discard pile, and I'll take this as my planet. So, because I led survey, each other player in turn order would have an opportunity to also play survey cards to look at and potentially keep planets, or dissent and simply draw one card from the deck. The warfare card, if you play it as your action, you will simply collect one spaceship, one fighter, and add it to your play area. There we go. I just made it a white to make it more visible on this table. If you play warfare as your role, you basically do the same thing. You collect a number of fighters equal to the number of warfare symbols that you have access to. The other thing you can do if you play it as your action is, if you've already got a pool of fighters, you can conquer a planet. To conquer a planet, you discard fighters equal to its cost. So this one costs 2 fighters to conquer. This one costs 5. So if I wanted to, as my action, I could play this warfare card, discard my 2 fighters, and conquer this planet, flipping it face up. This planet is now part of my empire. It is worth 2 victory points, and it provides me with a good slot. This option is also available to you if you pick warfare as your role. So if you pick warfare as your role, you can attack a planet instead of collecting fighters. Note that this is literally instead of collecting fighters. So if you pick warfare as your role and decide to attack a planet, you actually don't get any benefit by playing additional warfare cards from your hand. The colonize action is very similar to the warfare action. You can either settle a planet or plus 1 colony. To plus 1 colony, you take a colonize card and you put it underneath, usually, a planet to indicate that you are starting to colonize that planet. If you pick the colonize role, you can play an additional colonize cards out of your hand, and then all of these colonize cards you can tuck underneath planets that you control to progress them towards completion. Similarly to warfare, if you play colonize as an action and you have a planet that has the prerequisite colonies on it, this alien world requires 2 colonies in order to colonize it. I've got 2 cards here tucked on this planet. So as my action, I could turn this card face up, colonize this planet, add it to my tableau. These colonized cards that were tucked underneath that planet, plus this one I just played, would just simply go to my discard pile. Also, similarly to warfare, if you have a planet that is ready to be colonized and you pick colonize as your role, you still take a card out of the center, But instead of being able to tuck this card underneath any of your planets, you simply select a planet that is ready to be colonized and do the same thing. This card and the colonized cards on that planet are sent to the discard pile, and the planet flips and is added to your empire. The produce trade card has two different actions and two different roles associated with it, but they are interrelated. As an action, you can produce or trade a single resource. If you're picking produce, then you grab a resource token and add it to any planet that you have face up in your empire that has one of these resource slots. In the base game, the color of the tokens does not matter. And as an action, you can pick trade and discard a resource token to gain one influence, which is, of course is worth victory points at the end of the game. If you pick produce trade as a role, you can again boost it with cards from your hand. If I did this right now, I would pick produce, and I would be able to produce up to 2 goods. And then on a future turn, I could pick produce trade again and play another 2 symbols to sell these off for 2 victory points. Then the last possible action is research. If you play a research card as an action, you can pick up to 2 other cards from your hand and remove them from the game. The cards that are removed from the game do not go back to the center stacks. Find a discard area. You can use these are containers over here. If you're on this mod, you can use this. Put them someplace where they're not going to re-enter play. Every time you pick a role, you will be adding a card to your deck. And this research action is the method by which you can thin your deck. If you pick research as your role, again, you can boost it with cards from your hand. You can look through these stacks of technology cards and pick something to add to your deck or tableau, as the case may be. Some of them are permanent and enter directly into play. Each one of these stacks has prerequisites that are there on the bottom right. So this card, this improved warfare card, requires that you have 1 fertile planet. You can see the 1 planet symbol there at the bottom right, and it looks like a greenish planet, so that's fertile. This stack requires metallic planets. That's the reddish planet. This stack requires advanced planets. Those are the planets with the rings. And if you forget what kind of planets you have, you can peek at the back of these. I've got a fertile metallic right now. When you research, you don't have to take the top card of the deck. You can search these stacks to figure out what you want. So there's 2 kinds of technologies in these stacks. There are these normal technology cards, we'll call them. This improved trade requires that you have 3 technology symbols during your research roll to be able to add this card. These cards have improved, slightly better actions on them. Like this is an improved trade card, and all it does is you collect 1 influence directly from the supply instead of having to buy and sell, which takes 2 actions. Here's improved production. As an action, it produces 2 resources instead of 1. Here's improved colonize. You can, as an action, you can settle 1 planet and then either settle a second planet, or tuck this card beneath a planet so that it counts as a colony. You'll also notice that these cards that I'm showing you have two different symbols on them. So if this card is in your hand and someone plays the survey roll, because it has a survey symbol on it in the upper left, you can play this to follow that survey roll. There are some cards in this supply that require multiple planets for you to acquire. This survey team card requires that you have 2 metallic planets colonized or conquered in your tableau, and you have 5 research symbols as part of your research roll to acquire this card. In each of these stacks is 1 or 2 permanent technologies. If you research a permanent technology, you need to look at it. They are double-sided. You pick which side you want and put it into your tableau, whichever side you wish up. This fertile ground is worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. The technologies that are worth 5 or more tech symbols to research are worth victory points at the end of the game, and gives you a couple extra symbols to play with. Abundance, when you purchase it, it produces 4 resources, and then when you settle or attack a planet to add it to your empire, you produce 2 resources. Everyone starts with this 1 politics card in their starting deck. The politics card is not associated with any role. It is only an action. As your action, you could play your politics card, remove it from the game, and take one of the other 5 cards in the central display. This can help you get into a certain strategy or path. I wanted to cover briefly how various symbols on planets and text could help you perform various actions. So these symbols that appear on face-up planets or text in your tableau can help you boost rolls when you lead them. So if I played the warfare roll right now and did not boost it from a card with a card from my hand, I would get 1, 2 fighters because this planet provides a warfare symbol. If I led the colonize roll and I tucked 2 cards underneath this planet normally requires 3 colony cards. I currently have 2 tucked underneath it, but I've got a colony symbol on this fertile ground. This colony symbol basically gives me a free colony, so on a future turn, I could play a colonize action and flip that planet. Produce or trade is fairly straightforward. If you have any symbols on planets or text in your tableau, you simply add to the total. If I picked produce right now as my roll and I took a card from the center, I would produce 1 good, 2 goods because of this symbol, 3 goods because of this symbol. If I picked trade, I would only sell a single good because these are the produce symbol and not the trade symbol. If I picked the research roll right now, I would take a research card from the center roll and I would have 1 research symbol, 2 research symbols, 3 research symbols, without playing any cards from my hand. At the end of your turn, there is a cleanup step. You do have to perform your cleanup step. During your cleanup step, you choose what cards that are left in your hand you wish to discard so that you can hold on to some cards into the next turn cycle. This may be relevant if you're hoping somebody else plays a role that you can then follow, or to set yourself up for next turn. But you discard any cards that you don't want and then draw back up to your hand limit, which is usually 5 cards. There are some planets in the planet deck that can increase your hand size. The game end will trigger when one of two things happens. Either all of the influence tokens have been claimed from the supply. The supply starts at 24 influence tokens. Or one or two of the stacks of these primary action cards have been depleted from the center row. Usually it is two, but it can be just one stack depleted if playing at 2 or 3 players. When that happens, the round is finished, so each player gets an equal number of turns. And then you count up victory points to determine the winner. Victory points can come from influence tokens, comes from planets that are face up in your tableau, and from tech cards that are either in your tableau or potentially in your deck. And the person with the most influence is the winner. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If I made an error or messed up in any way, shape, or form, please leave a comment down below. I love learning games, but we all learn better when we learn together. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you would like, do the YouTube things, like the video, or subscribe to the channel. You can also check the links. See you around.